Today's video is about why artists should think and move like athletes. And the reason why I wanted to make this video is because I've been in a mindset shift of seeing the importance and even proving the importance in my own life of cross-training in different disciplines, but not just in the physical work, but in the mindset of different disciplines as well. And one of the biggest things I see, especially for me, I come from a very artistic background, musical theater, plays, making music, all dancing, all types of stuff. But I've also grown up an athlete as well. And I've noticed that there's a lot of things that each side can learn from each other that then provide a holistic, comprehensive understanding of how to achieve whatever goal you want. And the reason why I say that kind of vaguely is because if you choose to do this path, because you can always just identify as a thing and still live a worthwhile, meaningful path. Being a label or some sort of identity gives you grounding and structure. But if you take a bit more of the unconventional path and see these areas, even in one aspect, as something that you do, not something that you are, it really opens up your brain to be able to use multiple different tools to solve a problem, rather than limiting yourself to a certain type of identifier to say, in order for me to solve this problem like an artist, I have to only think and move like an artist. But if you see yourself as someone who's creating art or creating this certain painting or play, you can still be open enough to take from different disciplines and then attribute that same endless amount of tool sets to the same goal. So to get right into point number one, you need to develop a growth mindset. So what I wrote here is that athletes constantly refine their skills through training and feedback. Artists can do the same by seeing each piece as a part of an ongoing journey of self-improvement. This mindset encourages risk-taking and innovation, which I think artists already have in abundance. But I feel that one of the things that artists could really learn to do is detach their sense of self-worth from the quality and quantity of art that they're making. And I think it would almost be ludicrous for a soccer player to see if they missed a kick into a goal as the identifier of their potential worth as a athlete. It's just a part of the rep. A lot of sports analogies are really good for quotes of like, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. It's about reps after reps after reps. Drillers make killers. I feel that art is almost the opposite, where because it's such an internal work, because it often is a compilation of your memories, your personal skills, what you feel is a gift from some sort of higher being, a mix of trauma or your strengths or your weaknesses. It requires so much of you that it's natural to attribute your value in that piece of work. But I find that even if you look at artists that we admire, like Leonardo da Vinci or Picasso, they also had to do a number of repetitions to create the artworks and the experimentations and designs that we admire today that have lasted for so long. And so I feel that if artists, especially because we can be more emotionally sensitive, very intuitive, can learn to detach a bit from that sense of judgment that what you create, you are. This almost over maternal sense that we have over our art, and detach a bit to say, though this is part of me and came from me, it has its own life to live, and really see it as a skill to build, to then continue to be able to execute those things. I think it really allows you space within yourself and what you create to grow and to develop your gifts on a more consistent, sustainable, long-term path. So this is number two. Blend structure with spontaneity. Embrace routine. So similar to the first point that I made about learning to ground yourself a bit more and detach from the sense of emotional ego that we might have about our own personal projects, though not to say get rid of that entirely, that is the heart of being an artist, but having space for both mentalities. One book that I was reading that was given to me by a former teammate of mine was a book called The War of Art I have the book right here. It's called The War of Art by Steven Pressfield. When I first really read the book, there was a big sense of grief that came over me at the idea of turning professional. Because I think for a lot of artists, structure can sometimes feel like a cage. It can feel stifling. If you're defined by a certain adherence to traditionalism or technique or form, you lose the spirit of what makes you feel like an artist and feel like art itself as well. Being in flow with this energy, this pure, chaotic, energetic, just immersion in whatever you're trying to create. And so when I first read this book, I was like, fuck this. Because the idea of losing myself or the fear of it really prevented me from seeing what will later be the safety net that is becoming a professional. So I want to read this first. So this passage is called Professionals and Amateurs. Aspiring artists defeated by resistance share one trait: They all think like amateurs. They have not yet turned pro. The moment an artist turns pro is as epochal as the birth of his first child. With one stroke, everything changes. I can state absolutely that the term of my life can be divided into two parts: before turning pro and after. To be clear, when I say professional, I don't mean doctors and lawyers, those of the professions. I mean the professional, capital P, as an ideal. The professional in contrast to the amateur. Consider the differences. The amateur plays for fun. The professional plays for keeps. To the amateur, the game is his avocation. To the pro, it's his vocation. The amateur plays part-time, the professional full-time. The amateur is a weekend warrior. The professional is there 7 days a week. This is really the important part. The word amateur comes from the Latin root meaning to love. The conventional interpretation is that the amateur pursues his calling out of love, while the pro does it for money. Not the way I see it. In my view, the amateur does not love the game enough. If he did, he would not pursue it as a sideline distinct from his real vocation. The professional loves it so much he dedicates his life to it. He commits full time. That's what I mean when I say turning pro. Resistance hates it when we turn pro. So the reason why I wanted to read that passage and why I felt it was so important, it was because it was almost like a dark night of the soul, of feeling like I was grieving this ideal of making art on a whim, making it without any structure, letting creativity flow through me and just being the vessel when it appeared. But what that mindset limits you is that it doesn't allow you to turn your art into a craft. And I think those are two different things. I think anyone can make art, but not everyone can be a craftsman in their art or craftswoman. When you add structure and discipline to your life, right? Even in this passage, the next one, he says, someone once asked Somerset Maugham if he wrote on a schedule or only when struck by inspiration. That person said, "I write only when inspiration strikes," he replied. "Fortunately, it strikes every morning at 9 a.m. sharp. That's a pro." In terms of resistance, Maugham is saying, "I despise resistance. I will not let it faze me. I will sit down and do my work." Maugham reckons another deeper truth, that by performing the mundane physical act of sitting down and starting to work, he set in motion a mysterious but infallible sequence of events that would produce inspiration, as surely as if the goddess had synchronized her watch with his. He knew if he built it, she would come. I'll leave that there because I could keep going with that, but I really recommend this book, especially if you are doing any creative work. You could be an engineer building bridges. This sort of mindset towards building a craft, especially if it's something that you're leading yourself, it isn't assigned to you by a job, it isn't something that your parents are telling you to do, something that is really coming from the core of you to build. This gives you that framework and that sternness that I think also adds to that grief of realizing that being a professional in some ways is just like dating for experience and love versus dating to marry. It's two different mindsets, right? One is building an experience, the other one is building a legacy. And when you do decide to become a professional, one thing that I found that was almost curious to me, and I guess this is more of a free-flowing video, was that when I looked at celebrities, athletes, people who had reached the highest level of their craft, or at least to the point of mainstream appeal, they all had different areas of mastery. Some were ice skaters, some were gymnasts, some were artists, some were engineers or business folks. They all had different skills that they built, but I was always curious of why they all hung out. A swimmer, in terms of their skill, does not have much in common, at least on the surface, with someone who has built a software business. But they would go to each other's games. They would see each other at various events. They would mingle and network. But what I realized, and this is, stay with me, right? This is my theory. I believe that when we come on this earth, we are given a few different opportunities for dreams and skills that we can achieve on the highest level. I think every dream lasts probably max 20 to 25 years to reach full maturation, which is why you see even people like Andre 3000, who's been rapping since he was probably, I would say, young, probably since he was a kid. But in terms of being famous for it, I would say early 20s, if not late teens. And even he has transitioned from being a rapper his entire life to doing the flute. And he did that for about 20, 30 years. I think even no matter how high, you look at football players that have been doing it since they were a kid, I think no dream lasts a whole lifetime, but it's a significant part, about a quarter of a century. And I believe that we're given our own unique set of dreams to fulfill, because what do you call it? God, divine energy. It's the carrot to do the work. It's the candy, the spoonful of sugar to make the medicine go down. And underneath every dream is the same core principles that everybody at the highest level has to do to achieve their dream, which is why I think they get along. Those underlying principles are discipline, consistency, patience, diligence, self-control, mastering your mind, being able to have a great emotional management, being able to handle fear and doubt and wanting to give up, facing the resistance, as what Steven Pressfield calls it. That sort of inertia that says, maybe you shouldn't do this thing, or this thing is difficult, or it's scary, or I don't think I'm capable of doing this thing. I believe that's why all these people at the highest level are able to enjoy and appreciate each other, because they know that underneath their unique areas of mastery, they had to all have the same areas of discipline, whether it be connection, whether it be consistency, creativity, and so on. To be a crafts person, a crafts woman in your art, it requires you to put aside your sense of self-worth a little bit to say, I value building this thing more than being afraid of how maybe failing at this thing, the difficulty of creating this thing, the uncertainty if I can create this thing. These various states of mindset be worth more to me than building the thing, if that makes sense. I always use the example of raising something, whether you're raising a child or raising a small animal, because it doesn't become about you anymore, or at least it shouldn't in full, because that thing you're nurturing is more important than your ego about who you are and who you perceive yourself to be. And so I believe that a professional loves her craft enough to be disciplined about it. If your art is a hobby, then being an amateur is fantastic. If you want to build things for the love of the game and just appreciate it as a game, there's nothing wrong with that. This is not speaking to that person that just wants to paint on the weekend as a form of an outlet. I'm more speaking to the person who wants to build a craft. If you want to dedicate and develop mastery, you have to mature your perspective of creating. Incorporate discipline and routines while leaving space for creative experimentation. A structured approach to practice can free up mental energy for unexpected inspired moments. Allow the muse to grace your creative doorstep. And so I think by adhering more to structure and realizing that structure can be made creatively for you as well. It doesn't have to be what they say is traditional structure. If you find that certain times of day work for you, then so be it. If you find batching work works for you, so be it. If you want to just create one art piece a month and you want to take more time, but you're adhering to that structure, so be it. Discipline is as creativity. It's just anchored in order, right? Classical music and jazz music all have the same underlying music theory, but it's what you do with it that makes it count, right? You can create a bunch of chaos with it and create jazz as we know it, or you can hear it as so much structure, it becomes classical music that is the same throughout literally centuries. It's all about what you do with the instrument, right? But as long as you play it consistently, that's the point. So I'm gonna go into point number 3, which is train your mind and your body. Recognize the importance of physical health and mental conditioning. Your body is the vessel your art pours through. Incorporating exercise routines like walking, Pilates, lifting, martial arts, breakdancing, or mental exercises like meditation, shadow work, breath work can sharpen your focus and fuel creative energy. I love the Kabbalion principle, which is the all is mind, the universe is mental. But your physical body is almost the joystick of which you operate the game of life with. And they work in tandem. You have multiple bodies. You have your mental body, you have your emotional body, you have your spiritual body, you have your prior perception, your way you kind of orient yourself through space. There's many various forms of intelligence that you have in your body. But what I find creates such a holistic vessel for you to then create through is when you see them as all interchanging parts of the same thing, right? Which is your being as it is. For me, on a practical level, not to just make it super abstract and theoretical, you find that you feel more comfortable in yourself in terms of expressing when you have physical work done. It allows you to get rid of the excess thoughts and energy in your body and almost see it no different than cleaning out your house, washing your dishes. It just allows you to keep firing through your system more fluidly and more readily as well. After working out for, at this point, almost 4 or 5 years consistently, meditating, I would say semi-consistently, like at least a couple times a week, I'm always meditating for about 1.5 years, I can tell such a big difference when I don't do it for even as much to a couple days or a week. My body just feels heavier. My mind just feels more clogged. I'm more reactive to things rather than being proactive. And I find that When you treat, not to be cliche, but treating your body as a temple, it really gives space for that creative energy that you're looking for to come through. Even now in moments when you tend to indulge in vices, maybe a glass of wine or whatnot, I almost wonder, even recently, I was like, how do artists create if they're constantly fogging up their mind so much? And I know oftentimes it's vices for maybe trauma or a coping mechanism, or you do feel like you're tapping into a bigger muse. I do believe for a lot of times, for a lot of artists, drugs or alcohol can allow you to transform your mind and enter a different mind state to then alter or interact with different realities that then allow you to create from a different place. I do understand the history of connection between creating and altering your mind state, but I find that there are a lot of sustainable ways that you can do the same stuff without having long-term damage on your physical body. That's not to say don't have alcohol, don't smoke if that's what you prefer to do. But I think being the artist that you are and experimenting with different forms of that, whether it be breath work. There's some times when you can get really deep into meditation and it feels almost like you are altering your mind, that the world feels different around you. And even for me, sometimes through a workout, I say I want to end up being a different person after this workout. I almost want to transform and shed the old me by working through this weightlifting routine for the day by the end of it. Sometimes when you just put on your hoodie and you say, I just want to sweat out whatever is in my head, you do a heavy workout session, you go get a sauna, you feel almost as like mind altered as you would if you wanted to have alcohol for the night or dance the night away. And I think it also adheres even more as an artist to treat your body as the vehicle for your expression. Because for a lot of artistry, it can come from a more internal, deeply emotional and or spiritual place. And I think even being an acolyte for your art, being monks, I love of looking at Buddhist monks because they really, a lot of times, do adhere to balancing the mind and the body at the same time. That whole kind of archetype of the jacked monk is really cool to me because everything is in alignment. Does that mean you need muscles to be an athlete? No. You look at Kenyan runners and they're skinny as shit, but they're elite athletes. No one will deny that. And so I think that by creating a vessel for yourself to then create your art, it just makes everything more in alignment for yourself. And you feel good. Like whatever body type you have or you want or you create, it just feels good to move your body in motion and to just be active with yourself. It allows you to think bigger and think quicker. Your brain becomes its own fast twitch muscle and it can just snap in an instant because you've been honing the craft of you for so long. And so number 4 for the last point, which is embracing feedback as a catalyst. Just as athletes review game tape, artists should seek constructive criticism to refine their craft. Embracing external insights accelerates growth and inspires new directions. It also distances your ego and sense of self-worth from your craft. You can be more objective and less emotionally ruled by your art. I think people already do this a bit with workshops and whatnot, and sharing your art online. I think there's a certain vulnerability that may not even exist in athleticism that exists naturally in art all the time. Oftentimes in art, you're showing aspects of yourself, of your internal world to people and hoping that they perceive it at least the way that you hope that they do or the way that you intended them to do. But there's a level of vulnerability and bravery that I've always admired in artists because you have to put your heart out there in a way that you have to almost train it to be able to take feedback if you're not used to it. And I think there's a few rare places that allow you to do that. Sales, martial arts, but it's a certain type of bravery to do so. But I think that by seeing it as part of a system, when you put all of these things in tandems, training your skill, creating structure to train your skill, getting feedback on your skill, and really seeing it as a craft a bit outside yourself, I think all these things in tandem will allow you to be a much more impactful, efficient, and creatively powerful artist because you create so many structures and systems for yourself that all creativity has to do is show up and the magic is being made. And so that's pretty much it. This is why I believe artists should think like athletes. And again, like I said at the beginning of this video, I feel that by incorporating the mindsets and training frameworks from different areas of disciplines in life, you really can create such in a positive way, Frankenstein of a form for yourself that is cultivated and specific to what you need. And if you have a bit of the ego that wants to be the best or wants to be the greatest, these are the things that give you an edge in the game. Because it's one thing, it's already a lot of work to train in the traditional way of your art. But if you then start to incorporate edges and fulcrums from other areas, it's such I don't want to say easy, but simple way to be ahead of the game that doesn't require nearly as much work as trying to be a specialist in one thing. If you have foundational aspects from other areas, I think enough of them layered over time equal mastery in one field. And so this is for the artist that wants to step up their game and really be a craftsman of their art and not be ruled so fully for it. But again, I say, if you're seeing art as more of an emotional outlet, it's more of a fun party for you, then keep doing that. There's so much beauty in just being able to create for the sake of creation. But I found for myself that when I realized that doing things out of just infatuation wasn't enough for me, I really wanted to build something, changing my mindset and my mental framework to adhere to a more consistent structure really gave me a lot of anchors to lean on and let it work for me in my favor, because I didn't have to overthink so much to create. I had systems that I built over time that could do the thinking for me. So I hope this helps, and peace.